Welcome to this new series that I'm so excited about digging into. You might be familiar with my readings of The Bark Covered House. And that's just one continuous reading or narrative, and I read it with a little bit of commentary. We're going to flip that idea upside down. This book that I want to discuss right now is Peter Kalm's Travels in North America. He travels in North America in 1748, 1749, and 1750 on a scientific mission. And he's from Sweden, and he's coming to North America to tell people in Sweden about the agriculture and the culture itself, the people, the geography of North America, hopefully with ideas about how to improve things going on in Sweden. So he's giving us these little snapshots, these little things that he sees that he thinks are of great interest and would be of great interest to people in Sweden. Well, for us, they're a perfect description. He's describing these things as an outsider, just like us. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let me find the first reading. Let's start at the very beginning of his adventures here in North America. We're going to skip over what little bit of description we have of England and of the voyage itself and skip right to when he gets to Philadelphia. So here we go. At last we arrived in Philadelphia about 10 o'clock in the morning. We had not been more than 6 weeks, or, to speak more accurately, not quite 41 days on our voyage from Gravesend to this place, including the time we spent at Deal in supplying ourselves with the necessary fresh provisions, etc. Our voyage was therefore reckoned one of the shortest. It was common in wintertime to be 14, 19, or more weeks in coming from Gravesend to Philadelphia. Hardly anyone ever had a more pleasant voyage over this great ocean than we. Captain Lawson affirmed this several times. Nay, he assured us that he had never seen such calm weather on this ocean, although he had crossed it often. The wind was generally so favorable that a boat of middling size might have sailed in perfect safety. The sea never went over our cabin, but once over the deck, and that was only in a swell. The weather was indeed so clear that a great number of the Germans on board slept on deck. The cabin windows did not need the shutters. All these circumstances which show the uncommon quality of the weather. Captain Lawson's civility increased the pleasure of the voyage, for he showed me all the friendship that he could have shown any of his relations. As soon as we had come to the town and cast anchor, many of the inhabitants came on board to inquire for letters. They took all those which they could carry, either for themselves or for their friends. Those which remained the captain ordered to be carried on shore and to be brought into a coffee house where everyone could make inquiry for them. And by this means he was rid of the trouble of delivering them himself. I afterwards went on shore with him. Before he went, he strictly charged the second mate to let no one of the German refugees out of the ship unless he paid for his passage or someone else paid for him or bought him. Whew. So that's just a single page, but it tells us a lot about voyages to North America from England in this 1748. So what is happening? We find out that he has an extremely short voyage. A voyage of, what does he say, 6 weeks? So 41 days, not even a full 6 weeks. And then he says at other times people had voyages of 14, 19, or more weeks. And he's not joking about the more weeks. There are some just harrowing descriptions of the travels by ship from England to North America, some taking as much as a half a year to get there. 6 weeks is nothing. They had the finest weather ever. People slept on deck because the weather was so kind. He says, really the seas only crashed over the top of the ship a single time, just sweeping the deck, which is just nothing compared to some voyages where they would be just racked week after week of storms. So they just had the most pleasant voyage ever. It was kind of, coming against the winds sometimes to get to more North America because of these constant westerly winds, and they're heading west. So they just have the most pleasant voyage ever. Wouldn't that be, sounds like just a very, very, a pleasureful trip coming to North America, which this didn't happen that often. And then we hear about this idea of the mail. So we're immediately introduced with the concept that mail came on board the ship. People wanted to send messages to North America. Probably lots of people wanted to send messages to North America. People they knew, maybe business interactions, personal interactions, family, whatnot. And they knew a ship was sailing. They went to the ship, said, could you please take this message with you, take this letter with you. This is happening in a lot of different journals. I think this is probably happening all the time, and people aren't necessarily telling us about it. But here, Peter Kalm takes the time to tell us that the captain had many letters to deliver. People immediately, upon seeing the ship come in, said, oh, the ship's come in, maybe they've got letters for me. They go on board the ship to inquire of letters for themselves or people they know directly. And all those letters that aren't picked up, so you can imagine if you went on board the ship, you might look for letters for yourself, for your neighbors, for other family members. In this case, all the letters that weren't picked up, they were taken to the nearest coffee house or tavern and set down there. And when people are traveling in North America, they're expecting the idea that as they travel, they're going to these different taverns and inns, that there's going to be mail there of all sorts. And they might be mail for themselves or somebody else, and they would, if they were traveling on, if they saw a letter that meant to go further on, they would take it along with them. We can't imagine today, I'll carry that letter for you, or just some random piece of mail. You're headed to the next town, and the mail's sort of like a hitchhiker going along on these trips with other people. So we see the mail getting picked up, we see the mail getting dropped off. And then the captain leaves the ship, but he makes sure to tell the captain to not let any of the German refugees off the ship. And what these are people that are going to be probably indentured servants to the New World. They didn't have enough money to pay for their travels into the New World. They wanted to get there. So they bargained with the ship owner. They said, if I can't pay for my trip, will you let me go along, and someone at the other side will pay for my trip. Either as maybe a family member, you would bargain with a family member to help pay your passage once you got there, or that you would indenture yourself. So you would say, I will be your servant for the next 3, 5, 7 years into the future if you pay for my trip here. And so if people were looking for servants, to work in their household, to possibly work in their fields or in their factory or whatnot, they would go to a ship that's coming in and look for people that need to have their passage paid for. And if nobody comes on board the ship to sort of ransom that person, that's why he kind of calls them refugees, because they're leaving but they don't have the means to pay for it. They will take those people into town and try to find people other folks in town that will pay for their passage, again, in exchange for labor into the future. And this is very, very common. A lot of people got to the New World, got to North America by this means. And a lot of them were from, in this case, Germany or other parts of the continent. Folks that are really looking for a new start in the New World, and this is their only way to get there. This is just the first glimpse. You can see it. This is a big book. I've got probably 200 or 300 notes, and as I go through a series like this, it's just hard telling how many things we're going to find to talk about as we move into this book. It is truly a snapshot of what's going on in North America from the eyes of somebody who's seeing it fresh and new. This is the kind of person we really want to pay attention to. If you grow up in a place, you really don't know what's odd, strange, or interesting about it. But as someone new and fresh to the area sees it for the first time, They really can pick out those kinds of things that if we were a traveler back in time, we would want more information about. That's what Peter Kalm is doing for us in this book. So I think it's truly one of the most important works for us to help to really understand what North America was looking like to a stranger in the time period. Some pieces of literature from the time period are great for getting the idea of what it looks like from the eyes of somebody who's always been there, but this is from the eyes of a stranger who's never seen these kinds of things before. He tells us what's similar and what's completely different than what he's used to. Truly a great work, and I can't wait to get into the next episode. We've already got a great idea of what it would be like to land here in North America and see the things that are happening immediately. I mean, something as sort of strange and esoteric as the mail, I find fascinating because it's so different from what the mail is like today. So I thank you for coming along on this one. Make sure to join us for the next episode where we dig into Peter Kalm and we find the next little page, little tidbits of information that are going to be just so ultimately fascinating. Thank you for your tremendous support for what we do here on the channel, on YouTube, on Townsend's Plus. Thank you for all your support. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.